So this is a special episode of the Infodump files because this will be part of the Stimmy Vibrations, a day to celebrate autistic voices event. And what I wanted to do is on my separate podcast, Autism Stories, I'll be talking a little bit more about the creation of the event and all of that. But I wanted to talk today about Becca's role in Stimmy Vibrations because I feel a lot of times sometimes people aren't given credit for their role in certain things, and I want to make sure Becca gets the credit that she's due, especially if you're watching and part of the Stimmy Vibrations event today and it's helpful to you, you're enjoying it. If you don't like it, you can just blame me.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'll take those emails too. You don't have to take it alone. Sure.
Okay. So, at least for me, I always have like a million different ideas. And one of them was for this event because every April, but I don't know why it was last April, I was even more annoyed how terrible the whole month went.
Yes.
And my personality is if I don't like something, if I have a problem, I need to come up with maybe not a solution, but a way to make it better. So that was kind of the idea behind this event. And I'm very careful about when I have an idea, who is like one of the first people I will talk to it about, because people can really get in the way of ideas kind of moving forward. So
Agreed.
I don't know if Becca was the first person. She might have been. If she wasn't the first, she was probably the second person that I reached out to, and I was like, Becca, here's my idea for this thing next April. And what do you think? Is this an idea that is going to be good in any way at all? Do I need to seek professional help for just coming up with the idea? What's the deal? And Becca will always give me her opinion, always give the opinion, add her opinion, and I appreciate that. And she was really positive about it and has been really helpful behind the scenes in making this happen. So I just wanted to take these few minutes to say thank you, Becca, and I appreciate you not shutting down the idea so quickly.
Well, I thank you for trusting me. It's actually a pretty big honor to be someone's sounding board in that way, right? It requires a lot of trust when you throw a 4 a.m. idea out to somebody. Like, here, I thought about this. I woke up this morning. It still sounded good. What do you think? And so that's a really important, and I think that's what I dig about our relationship, is because Doug and I are doers. We don't like to sit on ideas. We have ideas and we're like, well, let's do it. So let's make it happen, because we both get frustrated by that unempowered feeling. Like, last April sucked. I don't want it to suck. I have to feel better about it. What am I going to do, right? And I agree with you that last year sucked worse than anything else. And I think I know why. I think because COVID changed the way that people were using April. They could no longer fundraise in that physical capacity, and so they've shifted to all of this online stuff, and suddenly it's not so important to fundraise during April and push it in that way, and that is disappointing, because that was not supposed to be the purpose of Autism April. The purpose of it is to acknowledge that there's a whole bunch of us on this planet who are autistic, and that hasn't changed just because of COVID. And so I'm all about it. And you know that I think that COVID was like a blessing for the autistic community in terms of remote work, in terms of people being more inclined to do things via the internet, right? And this is another one of those bonuses. We get to take April back. We get to take it and make it what we want. So I thank you for including me in the process, because that's really what it means to me. Yes, I love that we're celebrating autistic voices. I love that it's a podcast thing that we're doing, because we love that. But overall, I love that we're reclaiming April. I think that's my favorite part of it.
And our guest today, Maddie. I'm very excited to talk to you. Probably my 25-year-old self would even be more excited, because that was around the time period where I was reading a lot of existential philosophy, book after book, trying to figure out the meaning of life. And I guess maybe that's part of like kind of when people learn about their autistic identity. I think it's kind of connected to that. So your name on social media is the Existential Autist. So I'm gonna assume philosophy and existentialism is an important part of your life.
Yeah, just to start off with, thanks to Doug and Becca for having me. It's a real pleasure, and yeah, fantastic to be here. In terms of, yes, for myself, philosophy, especially in the last 4 years, has really been a fundamental part of my life, and claiming and perhaps reclaiming and starting to be authentic in autistic being. So yes, I really delved into existentialist philosophy while I was finishing off my philosophy degree, university in the UK. Yet previously there'd always been a kind of, I'd never had access to the subject because of lack of means, and where I'm from in the UK, Newcastle, the kind of education system, but always drawn to that kind of, that question of what is a true self? How can we be authentic? And the more I came to terms and accepted being autistic, neurodivergent and disabled, it just took on such a big level. Yet at the same time, a lot of that's to do with the welcome and embrace of the actually autistic community and the neurodivergent communities and disabled communities. So yeah, I'm glad that you can reconnect with that 25-year-old self, whatever. we're parts of it in there, Doug. Yeah.
Do you have any like favorite existential authors?
Yeah. So currently I go through phases of these things, and I think it's with the hyper focus, but getting into a mix of Kierkegaard and Schopenhauer currently, and looking into faith and taking leaps of faith and connecting it to autistic being. So I'm just going through trying to kind of bring that philosophy into taking away the kind of, jargon and elitism, because I find the subject, can be very much full of that. It's quite inaccessible. So trying to tie it in currently with, being autistic and connecting it to human rights, and not just this, navel-gazing subject for a select academic view, which, it needs to be for everybody. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at that, but also I do spoken word poetry, so trying to reflect that in the poetry I'm doing as well currently. So it's just an ongoing project, but a bit of Schopenhauer at the moment. Yeah.
And have you read much of Sartre or Nietzsche?
Yeah, well, with Nietzsche, I actually think an opinion of mine of Nietzsche's kind of perceived nihilism. I did look a lot into those books, Zarathustra, and tried to tie that into becoming and being authentic. But viewing nihilism, how to explain this, that, for example, the classic quote, God is dead, but it's not mentioned that we've killed him. Like, using it as a warning to kind of create a new faith and not lose all sorts of hope. So yeah, that was kind of a big part of trying to not turn into this classic kind of, depressive type. Actually, you can bring faith with that and hope for like neurodivergent self. Because for me, faith's a key part of that, rather than classic kind of nihilism. So yeah, a bit of Nietzsche, who had a lot of his works manipulated as well for propaganda.
I was a philosophy major myself, and so I'm trying to hold back from like just having a whole info dump to myself right now. But I think it's really interesting how, if you're a philosophy person and philosophy speaks to you and that's the stuff you want to think about, the way that you view different philosophers change as you develop, right? So, I mean, I was in college. I was 22 years old, and I was full nihilist. What? That was my life. And either that or the classics. That was it. I was very, very snobby about the whole thing, and like really into it. It was a special interest of mine for 6 years or so. That was a really interesting experience for me. And as I get older, I feel really uninclined to Western philosophers. And I'm finding that all of the stuff in the Eastern philosophy that I didn't understand when I was 22, I understand at 46. So it's been like a growth for me. And so I'm kind of relearning a lot of those things. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about also kind of phasing through that.
Yeah, Becca, I think that's fascinating, isn't it? How the perception shifts with time, and well, me being 27, but also always being seen like an old soul. I don't know if it's like the neurodivergent things have been around older groups with that, but I completely get you that it's still so obsessed with those Western thinkers and the classic, kind of white guys in the existential crisis. Right. I think leaning on more Buddhist philosophy as well and Zen thinking is kind of key. But yeah, I'd love to learn more, to be fair.
And you were saying how you do a little bit of spoken word poetry. I'm very interested in poetry these days. I haven't attempted it yet, but what kind of sparked your interest in poetry? So
poetry for me, again, in terms of a huge passion of mine, has always been the world of words. In terms of understanding myself and the world around me, I've always had this mind for the sound and rhythm. So literature and being exposed to that from a young age, and kind of it has always been a great stem of mine, actually discourse, any poetry. It's only recently something that I've became more open about in terms of spoken word poetry, but I've been writing quite a bit and keeping it to myself for a few years, more as kind of self-help and dealing with mental health and depression, anxiety. But now I'm publishing my own stuff on my own blog and website, trying to form some neurodivergent and autistic-led poetry and spoken word nights. I've got a group going now that's doing that, and online on Twitter we'll have spaces on there and just trying to connect. Well, I love the connections you see, so bringing the philosophy into that and trying to spread it across. But it's my escape, yet at the same time I can learn so much, I feel, about people and their experiences through poetry. So I love that world as well. And breaking down as well, I'll say this: the elitism again. That because of accent or grammar or being perceived as the right kind of, a lot of those classical circles can be toxic, as is the same with philosophy. So I'm really passionate to break down a lot of them hierarchies, so people can express as authentically and freely as they want, really.
One of the reasons I think I've gotten more interested in poetry is anything where I could speak less is like a thumbs up for me. And it seems like poetry, like the efficiency part of words, it's like, oh, you could say this one word here and it conveys 6 paragraphs, why use 6 paragraphs when you could say these 1, 2, or 3 words?
Oh, Doug, I love that everything, it all comes, and then why do you do podcasts, my friend? You don't want to talk. All we do is talk. Every time we get together, we talk. You're so great.
I guess a lot of contradictions, Becca.
Right.
I was going to say to that, Doug, the cliche saying, you may be a poet, but you just don't know it. Accepting it and having that skill in there and that passion. And I think, it goes, again, it feels like you're touched upon this thing of there's a classic idea of what it is or how things can be said. And I always say this with philosophy as well, and poetry. Everyone is a philosopher. Everyone's a poet. People are so multifaceted that we're not just a title that we think, well, with a podcast doing this, in a way it's a form of poetry. If you want to take it that way, and the way the questions are formulated, it's art, isn't it? It's an art form. So I think you're an artist with what you're doing. For you, so yeah.
Yeah, let's go with that. I'm an artist.
I like that.
We're artists, Becca. Come on.
I think think Maddie and I have done a good job of consoling you. He's very kind about it, and I just am the one that shoves you out the door. Like, go talk anyway. Here.
So, Maddie, something I learned from you recently was, and I don't know, maybe I'm just so unaware, is about Spaces on Twitter. And I know you're a host on Spaces on Twitter. Can you talk a little bit about like the benefits of that and what exactly do you do?
Yeah, it's certainly something I'm really involved with now. So in terms of the Twitter Spaces being introduced, I've only came to it recently in the last couple of months. Again, what is time nowadays? It's so surreal, but so it's basically like putting on like a kind of live podcast where people can come up to speak. There can be an audience, but you can use that kind of space for anything you really wish to host. So for me, I'm focusing currently a lot on mental health spaces for neurodivergent folks, performing poetry at some spaces that some friends are doing. Also, I help an organisation that I'm passionate to help, which is in the United States, Autistics Unmasked, which is a non-for-profit autistic-led, support group and advocacy led by, centering BIPOC voices in that community. So kind of trying to amplify that as well as all the other spaces. So it's really amazing, those kind of experiences, and I think it's bringing a whole new set of people into speaking authentically and openly through the medium of Twitter, but also trying to include non-speakers or those who are selectively mute. There is a bit of pressure there, like to ramble on like I might be with things, but saying to people, look, if you'd like to direct message, the co-host or the host would love to read out what your thoughts are, or what a question is. So I think it's very exciting, and I think it's just this new age that we're heading towards. So it's been very helpful, and I think just Becca discussing before about the start of pandemic and this kind of reawakening of communication, it's tied in with a lot of that. So there is kind of a rebirth in that, and opportunities for neurodivergent people to be accepted and heard.
Now, I saw a post from you on Twitter, or a message that I thought was very appropriate for this event, in which you talked about how the more neurodivergent, autistic, and disabled folks I connect with, the more I realize how much time in life I wasted trying to fit into a neurotypical world, so shallow, dull, and without true joy, love, empathy, and actual engaging discussion. So maybe, can you talk about that journey for you?
Yeah, that was, as heartfelt and as authentic I could get with that. And, every word, every utterance of that about, I think it connects to that philosophy and that existential kind of search for myself, because I spent so many years until really the pandemic engaging with my truer self and connecting with neurodivergent and autistic folks to the levels I am now, because of a lot of lack of acceptance of myself growing up and in society. So I spent a lot of time kind of previously in the last few years before that doing a lot of mental health kind of groups and such, but not being open about who I was, not being open about being autistic, why I was so passionate, involved in music, gigs, organising, political organising, yet there was always this inner self that connected to the existentialism that wasn't fulfilled, because I know now, because I wasn't connecting with neurokin, with those who'd had the lived experience. So it's been, it's a real process for me also of becoming and recovering from a lot of them kind of darker days of lack of acceptance, I suppose. So it's perhaps like transcendental almost in an existential sense, because for a birth of a new self, there's like a bit, so it's my own project of self going on, but with the advocacy and everything, it's like, it's very, very important to me and emotional.
That resonates with me so clearly. Like, for you, it's philosophy, and for me, my vehicle has been personal development and self-help. But it's that same, just want to find my real self underneath all of the other shit that everyone has put on top of me or done to me or has had or not happened to me, right? And all of that stuff. And I, for me, that vehicle was a lot more of this Eastern thinking, right? Very mindfulness based and things like that. Much more spiritually based than I want to say religiously based, but very spiritual growth for me. And I think that it's interesting that philosophy has been that tool for you, but it's a similar journey. And I wonder if that's part of the autistic journey in the society that we live in. Like, is that our responsibility to self to go through that journey?
Yeah, no, I'd love to come in on that, Becca, because, again, for me, the existentialism in the classical sense of it's a part of it, but as I mentioned, faith and spirituality and those connections to me is very important. I went through a time when I was in recovery, drinking a lot, substance, and I've always had, faith, my name being Matthew, but reaching out to other kind of faith systems and belief and, the serenity prayer, accept what you can, change it and can't. So I certainly believe there's a wisdom in energy, in realizing that cause and effect in a lot of the suppressed Eastern philosophies as well. A lot of, female philosophers that don't get discussed, and, some perhaps more revolutionary and life-affirming philosophy that still needs to be exposed within those belief systems. So I'm open-minded to, that's what I try to be. I try to be open-minded to different faiths and calling. And I say this as well, it's probably a classic philosophical discourse, but even the atheist has faith in nothing.
Right, exactly. That is such a classic philosophical conundrum. Everybody has faith. It's just what you have faith in differs.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's not being antagonistic with people. It's just trying to connect back to the self. And this is why I feel existentialism and how we can rehumanize people and address trauma so it connects to mental health in that journey. You know what I mean? I'm not sitting reading through every page of Nietzsche. I don't do it in that style. You know what I mean? It's more like using those moments of trauma and knowing that there's pain there for people, and trying to provide a new type of neurodivergent future in society where it is safe to say that, and we'll have some protection and energy in whichever faith you believe to transcend something, to move towards. I love learning about people's views of that. So,
Maddie, are there any? Do you have any things that you really love, or any special interests that we haven't talked about today?
Well, away from me rambling with the existentialism, I love Newcastle United. I've always my football club in the northeast. When I'm zoning out, when I'm de-stimming, I just watch some football. I don't know if everyone's saying soccer still, but yeah, a bit of football and whatever random sort of things. Just I love anything in nature really. Beaches at the moment. Well, actually, at the moment I'm in a class basically which is having autistic adults going in with autistic kids, kind of awesome club, and we're discussing special interests. So it's again a new way of doing things. So you try to have older adults who are doing things, and we're just talking a lot about bridges and the seaside. And so yeah, at the moment I'm kind of taking some photography in my own time as well of the sea and different bridges for friends across the pond, because I seem to be spending a lot more time with friends across the pond in Canada and all over. So yeah, it's very soothing to me, anything like that.
I think that's so important. I think one of the things I missed out on the most, I think, is A, knowing that I was autistic as a child, and then B, not having any autistic adult mentors to look up to. You can be autistic and be happy and an adult and successful and all of those things. And so it's one of my little mini missions to just be that right? If we're not out there showing kids that you can be an adult and autistic, then what do they have to look up to? And so, I love that you're doing that too. I think that's fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much. It's, it was on my mind, because it's connected with that future thinking, you know, in the days where things are intense and I run out of spoons and I might be selectively mute, just connecting with nature or, you know, watching some football or something small like that, and then taking it back to the youth and saying, look, we don't all have to, you know, be this, like, you know, I think something else, it's off topic, but we'll go on it, is like, you know, the notion of like being autistic and having to be this great performer or talker or some kind of, you know, like overcoming something, which connects to philosophy, of course, but it's toxic in that sense. It's where it's manipulated. It's like being autistic or being disabled isn't actually something to overcome. It's embracing that and saying it's okay if you have these days where you're overloaded, where you take your own time to care. So I'm trying to share that with people as well in the younger generation, so they're not coerced into doing things which will lead to a lot of breakdowns down the line. So.
Well, we always end each episode of the Infodump Files with a segment called the Inside the Autistic Studio, where we'll ask you 11 questions, Maddie. So the first question is, what are your pronouns?
He, him.
And what's your preferred stim?
Do like a little bit of hand flapping, stimming. I need a new bubble wrap. I used to have like this infinite bubble wrap on the back of my phone book, but yeah, a little bit of clicking.
What's your favorite curse word?
Probably bastard. You bastard. I don't know. Just, yeah.
I muted myself, but with your accent, it's so good when you say it. It's strong and powerful then.
Cheers, Becca. I'm cringe as anything, but I appreciate you, honestly.
And who do you love and what are you doing about it?
You know, Doug, I love the project going on here that you and Becca are doing. So yes, I'm feeling the love and I'm expressing it through the verbal form right now.
Thank you. The next two are fill in the blanks. You may be neurotypical if
you don't question authority, blindly accept anything.
And then you may be autistic if
think critically and be authentic, no matter the cost.
What's something you want to learn to do or be better at?
Anything musical instruments. Yeah, I'd like to have the patience with that, to have some patience to sit down and devote some time, and that connects with ADHD as well, but maybe I once played the triangle in a school play, I'll have you know, but other than that, nothing so far.
What autistic social media account should people be paying attention to?
Alright, so currently I gave a shout out before to Autistics Unmasked. I'd say Aut Collab, Neurodivergent Infinity, Black Autistics in the UK, and how far can I go? There's so many anything around autism acceptance rather than just awareness and neurodivergent emancipation, so there's loads.
What's one thing in your routine you couldn't possibly live without?
Writing. Just writing. Yeah, I should have thought that through. It's just writing down thoughts or anything troubling me. Yeah, I need to try to do that more. But yeah, I couldn't live without it.
Dog, cat, or must I choose?
If I had to, honestly, dog, but I love cats as well.
And the last question, what does autistic joy mean to you?
It's so many things, but right now, kind of an overall philosophical way of it, if I'm going to be like that, it's just having the pleasure of seeing other authentic autistic people expressing without fear, without being forced to change, without apologising. So there's something beautiful and transcendent beyond words experience in that. So that's joy, just being fully embraced and accepted.
All right, that was the last question, right?
Yep, that was it.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough, Maddie, for being here with us. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about these kind of like big, deep topics with us, right? Sometimes it's important that we think about the stuff that the world has to teach us. And I think one of the things that I loved about philosophy always is that it's stuff that people have been thinking about for a very, 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 very long time. And I liked the history of it and understanding the way people's thoughts unravel. And so it's interesting as we sit here in 2022 that we're all still thinking about it and talking about it. So I hope you guys will be inspired to think a little bit more about your internal identity and how you sort of come to that conclusion about yourself and what things inspire you and what doesn't. And with that, I say, happy Stimmy Vibrations Day. We are so excited to have gotten this off the ground and really just be able to celebrate all of our voices together. So yay, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.